What's up, guys? This is Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lantern.
My name is Monster, coach of the Atlanta Raptors.
And welcome to the NCL Season 2. This is our draft speculation, sort of ahead of the draft date and what we're expecting out of the draft and sort of our thoughts going into the draft. This is going to be the first video going up on our league YouTube channel, so shoutouts to that, and hopefully we'll get some more content up there throughout the season from myself, Austin, and Jed, and that's sort of the plan, and so we'll move on. So Austin, do you want to start us off with our first topic?
First up on the chopping block is obviously the mon that hasn't been allowed in any leagues so far is Zoroark. So we're basically going to talk about like what round I think it's going to go and stuff like that. In my opinion, Zoroark is kind of just a better Jolteon. I kind of agree with A-Drive's point of view on this. I think that it's not tier 1 worthy, but because it's so new and people want to try it so badly, it's probably almost assuredly going to go round 1. Who picks it is another thing because so many people are going to want it, but I do think it's going to go round 1 for sure, for sure.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that it's not actually a round 1 pick. I don't think it's good enough for round 1, despite the fact that we initially tiered it into tier 1. But I know a few people had their eyes on it. I have my eye on it for sure. Um, I'm not going to take it round 1 though, because I don't think it's worth a round 1 pick.
Yeah,
Just with, I mean, the speed is worth it, maybe, but at the same time, I just don't think that a pure electric type is worth a round 1 pick because you can't build a team around a pure electric type necessarily because it's just so easy to counter with a ground type, and Zeraora doesn't get good coverage to hit ground types with, so
yeah, for sure. It only gets HP Ice to hit ground types.
yeah, so it's not a fantastic mon. I know Jed's got his eye on it as well. I know Dom's got his eye on it, so we'll sort of see what's going
Yeah.
on there. See when the Zero Aura pick goes. I agree with you. I am expecting it to go round 1, just because it's sort of a new toy, and people love to play with new toys.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know, man. I think it's like one of those things where if it's one of those picks that falls through the cracks in tier 1, like kind of like Thunderous Therian seems to do like every draft for some reason, then I might pick it up because I mean, fast electrics are always really good, you know.
oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'm going through the same new toy thing. I'd really love to try it.
Yeah,
It was on the board for the potential Ubers changes, just the addition of one Uber per team that got voted down. So now we just
feels
sort of
bad, man.
threw it back into the mix here. So
Yeah.
I think that's all we had to discuss about Zero, or I don't think it's
Yeah,
that
pretty much.
complex.
It's really just kind of just speculating, like, does it go round 1? Does it go round 2? Who thinks it's good enough to be round 1? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, we know at least two people who aren't going to take it round 1.
Yeah, for sure.
So there you go. That's kind of we'll just throw that in the air, and then you guys can take a wild stab at who you think that might be.
Yep.
So our next topic is things that moved down from season 1 that we think acquired more value. So I'll sort of let Austin talk about that. It was mainly his point.
Yeah. If you look at the season 2 changes, a lot of things got moved down a tier. XD blame Ian. But so things that got moved down that I think are worth noting are Nidoqueen being moved to tier 3 definitely is going to be a very solid pick in tier 3. Haxorus being moved down to tier 3 has now become, again, the best dragon in tier 3. Um, Zoroark getting moved, I think, to tier 4 is definitely where it should be, and it's a really solid offensive dark type. Um, Gligar getting moved to tier 4 is definitely something that should have happened. It's very knockoff weak, but it's super bulky. I think it's technically bulkier than Gliscor if it has Eviolite. Manti getting moved to tier 4 is definitely appropriate because of the times 4 weakness. And Empoleon being moved to tier 3. I'm a really big Empoleon fan, so I can't really I'm kind of biased. I think it should be tier 2, but I think it being moved to tier 3 definitely picks up a lot of value. I don't really know how else to put it. because it has Stealth Rocks, SD Fog, and stuff like that. So yeah, just a lot of things that are being moved down that I definitely think are very good in their tier now.
So I'll sort of touch on why they were higher in the tiers. So we'll start with Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen was in tier 2 for season 1, and that was because I felt it was more viable to fit on more teams than Nidoking was. And Nidoqueen actually just went undrafted, and I realized afterwards that you really kind of need the Nidos together, so they either should both be tier 2 or both be tier 3, just because of the coverage options they get and how good Sheer Force is. With Poison and Ground Stab, like that's just an insane offensive coverage between the two of them. Haxorus, I thought, was powerful enough to be your tier 2, and then it went undrafted again, so sort of not feeling that being a tier 2 necessarily.
Yeah,
And, Kyurem had almost no competition, if not no competition, as a dragon in tier 3 last season.
yeah, for sure. I think
So, oh,
Haxorus
Zygarde
and
10, sorry.
Kirim.
Zygarde 10.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I think, in my opinion, Haxorus and Kirim are
Oh,
both like the
and
best
Kingdra.
dragons in tier 3. And Haxorus being tier 2 like made sense at the
Why not?
time, but after after it not being drafted, it was pretty clear that it should be tier 3.
Pretty much, yeah. Zoroark, I thought that Zoroark was going to be better than it was. And honestly, Muddy drafted it on his stall team, so I don't know if it should be moved to tier 4 or not, but I sort of just threw it down there. If it's too good, we can always move it back up. Gligar, I thought the addition of immunity plus defog, like the ability immunity, like your hidden ability Gligar being able to get access to defog with Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon move tutors, I thought that was enough to push it up to tier 3. I don't believe it got drafted, and I don't think that it's good enough for tier 3, to be honest, because it's just not. It doesn't have the offensive pressure, and the fact that it gets immunity plus defog just isn't enough anyways, because it's so weak to ice. Mantine I thought would be better, because I thought the value on defog might be a little bit higher since so many things get defog. Um, and so many of them are really bad, and we'll sort of touch on that in a little bit. Empoleon, I thought the addition of being able to have Defiant Empoleon with defog pushed it to tier 2, and I was way wrong. I don't think Empoleon um, fit a tier 2 role. I think there are a lot better options for a tier 2 role, despite it being a really good steel type in tier 2, which is hard to find. Um, yeah, so that's kind of, I think that was all of the value picks that we saw that moved down.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of things that moved down. Like Masquerain got moved to tier 4, Dustox got moved to tier 5 that I can think of off the top of my head. But the ones that are definitely going to matter were the ones that we just touched
Yeah.
on.
So I've got a long list of some bad mons that got moved down. So I'll talk about the movement, and then I'll sort of let Austin discuss what he thinks of it as well. So the first one was Masquerain moving from tier 3 to tier 4, and I had it placed in tier 3 because it got access to hidden ability with defog in Gen 7, and I wasn't sure how that would affect it. But what are your thoughts on Masquerain moving down?
I think it's pretty appropriate. I don't think Masquerain is anything special other than it being I think it's a fast web setter, right? That's pretty much all it's good for.
Yeah, I think it's
And
like base 80.
yeah,
Base
so
80.
I think that's pretty appropriate for Masquerain for sure.
It gets Intimidate, so it's a really good utility mon. I think it's going to be a really strong tier 4 pick. I know a lot of leagues have it in tier 5. I don't think that it's bad enough for tier 5,
Yeah, I
personally.
would agree with that.
Articuno, I know a few people argued with me that Articuno should have been tier 5 last season. It was tier 4 last season, so it moved down to tier 5. I thought Defog plus, I think, Snowcloak is what it got. I thought that was maybe enough. And the fact that it got Aurora Veil in Gen 7, I'm not sure.
Does it get a Roar Veil?
Yeah,
Dude, the more you know, but yeah, I don't think Articuno is anything special. I think the it's hard to explain. Like Zapdos should definitely be tier 1. And then Articuno and Moltres are both just really, really bad. And then Articuno is definitely worse than Moltres. So I think it being tier 5 is extremely appropriate,
yeah. The next up was Moltres. It moved from tier 3 to tier
ironically.
4. Yeah, I know, hilarious, isn't it? Moltres was tier 3 because, again, I thought Flame Body plus Defog was enough to push it over the top. And I actually thought that Moltres could do well in tier 3. but at the same time, people just weren't finding value with it, and there are some better fire types that they were looking at, things like Salazzle, things like Rotom Heat, things like,
Yeah.
um, what else is the fire? Things like Arcanine, things like Chandelure, all those things sort of had higher, Darmanitan, like all of those had better value for them in Tier 3 than Moltres did, just because of its 4 times weakness to rocks, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It's also kind of inconsistent because its best flying stab is Hurricane, and obviously that's not a fully accurate move. The same can be said about Articuno too. Its best ice stab is Blizzard, and it can't set the hail, so that's why it's just kind of
That's
not
true.
great in my opinion.
And I think with Moltres too, you see Sunny Day sets ran with it, and that's counterintuitive with Hurricane as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, the next one was Miltank. Miltank was in Tier 3 last season, and we moved it down to Tier 4. Um, I, Miltank is such a versatile wall, in my opinion, and it's actually a decent physical attacker as well. Don't even try and run it specially; it's just awful specially. But as a physical attacker, it can run some curse setup sets, and it gets decent coverage and things like Earthquake, Thunder Punch, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, things like that, along with just having really good normal stab, and then like Thick Fat with its bulk and reliable recovery and things like Milk Drink, and then you factor in the fact that it's got base 100 speed, which just outspeeds basically every other wall in the game. I thought that it was enough to push it up, but we moved it down because it was not good in that tier.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things in Tier 3 that are a lot better than Miltank. But yeah, dude, did you know that Miltank is base 100 speed?
Yeah,
You know how wild that sounds to me? This cow
it's a cow.
that sets rocks and is bulky is base 100 speed. Like,
Exactly.
that's insane to me. But yeah, so I think it's a really solid rocker because of the fact that it has base 100 speed. Like, a lot of the Pokemons that set rocks are going to be outsped by Miltank. Um, so that's kind of wild, but I don't think it had any business being in Tier 3. I think it being Tier 4 makes a lot more sense in my opinion.
The next up was Carnarvon. Carnarvon was Tier 4 last season, and I moved it down to Tier 5. It was silly of me to even have it in Tier 4, I think, at all. I thought I sort of just threw everything that got defog in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. I just threw it up a tier. And Carnarvon was one of those things. I still have no idea if it got defog in Gen 4 or not. I'm not sure if that's even relevant. It didn't get a hidden ability because it only gets Levitate, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
I thought maybe getting things like Knockoff might push it over the edge, but again, I didn't do enough research into it, so it's a tier 5 mon. It's bad. That's sort of where it stays. Um,
Yeah, there's actually like a really big list of things that got moved down to Tier 5. I'm assuming this is because a lot of these things got defog or something like that.
yeah, or had defog before and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
So
So like, I mean, there's literally like, I think this list is like over 10 mons that got moved to Tier 5.
yeah, the
So
next
yeah.
the next one was Castform, which I had a lot of people were like, "What the hell? What does Castform do in Tier 4?" And my argument to that, not just because it got defog, which it actually already got in Gen 4, but it's because weather teams were kind of so prevalent at the beginning of Gen 7 that I thought the Castform might work on like a hail team or a sun team or rain, which is easily the best weather in the format as well as just in competitive Pokemon in general. I thought Castform might sort of fit on one of those teams, and I wanted to sort of give it a little bit of light to itself, but at the same time, it's not good enough, and it moved back down to Tier 5.
Yeah.
Chimecho as well. I actually think Chimecho was a new defog recipient, but it's a bad Pokemon, and so it shouldn't have been in
Indeed.
Tier 4. Combuskin, I thought was a nifty one. I pretty sure defog was new to it, and the fact that it's like a really decent speed boost mon, I thought was kind of cool. Obviously, we don't allow baton passing any stats in this league, so uh, you wouldn't be able to baton
Yeah.
pass speed or attack or anything like that, though.
Yeah, I think that fact kind of just puts it to Tier 5. Like if you could baton pass the speed boost into with Combuskin, then I think it would be a Tier 4 mon, but the fact that you can't do that definitely makes it a Tier 5 in my opinion.
Dustox already got defog, I think, before, and I had arbitrarily moved it up to Tier 4. It's a bad mon. That's why it's in Tier 5. Hitmonchan is an interesting one because you see things like Hitmonlee and Hitmon top in tier 4 all the time, and I've actually seen Hitmonlee in tier 3. Specifically in the AABL, they actually tiered Hitmonlee into tier 3, and I think had Hitmonchan in tier 4 instead. But between the three Hitmons, Hitmonchan is by far the worst. It still gets really good coverage, but it just doesn't. It's too well-rounded in my opinion. Like it's too well-rounded between its defensing, being defensive and being attacking as well. Um,
Yeah, for sure. I agree with
like
that.
don't get me wrong, it's a good spinner, but it's just not good enough for tier 4 in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really know too much about Hitmonchan to be completely honest, but I would agree that it's the worst of the Hitmons. And what's Hitmonchan's hidden ability?
Oh goodness, I don't know. Let's find out.
Because like if it's anything other than Iron Fist, then it's bad. Like straight up.
No, it gets
Because
Iron Fist regularly. Keen Eye, it's Inner Focus.
see, that's so weird. Because like I know Hitmonlee gets Reckless, which is like super good
Super good.
for a fighting type.
And I think Hitmon top gets Technician, if I'm not mistaken.
Hitmontop gets a variety of really
Let me
good
just check
abilities.
that. It gets
Like
Intimidate normally, and
yeah,
it may get Technician normally as well. Oh, it does get Technician normally. What's its hidden ability? Steadfast. Okay, Steadfast is horrible.
and yeah, it's kind of bad, but Hitmontop is like really like it's actually like pretty good bulky wise
Yeah,
because of Intimidate.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so then Luminion got moved down to tier 5.
Oh God, I don't
Why
even.
was it moved? Why was it in tier 4 to begin
Defog.
with?
Defog.
Defog.
Yeah, that was
Yep.
why. Luminion's a bad Pokemon. No one's ever gonna draft it anyways. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's like on the top 10 list of most forgotten Pokemon is Luminion.
Pretty much, yeah.
Shiinotic being tier 5. Did he also get defog?
No, I've seen Shiinotic in tier 4 in quite a few leagues, and I think the reason is because it's another spore abuser, so it's not the best spore abuser. I believe Amoonguss, in my opinion, is the best spore abuser.
Undoubtedly.
Breloom is probably the second best spore abuser right after that, and
Yeah.
then Shiinotic's after that. But Shiinotic's just so damn slow. I think the reason it was in tier 4 is because um, of Strength Sap being super good as well. And it didn't get Strength Sap as a tutor move. I think it was actually its exclusive move until Vileplume got it. Um,
Yeah.
and sorry, the Oddish line, I guess, got it. Um, yeah, so it's also a decent fairy type, and I don't like under tiering fairies because there's such a good type in draft format, but it ended up being a huge mistake. And it's also 4 times weak to
Yeah.
poison. It's like the same. It's
Yeah,
the same.
that's what I was thinking the whole time that like Bulu being times 4 weak to poison I guess makes sense because it makes up for it makes up for that fact because it's such a hard-hitting Pokemon, but Shiinotic doesn't really make up that weakness anywhere in my
No,
opinion.
not at all. Not at all. So next was Viillon. Viillon got defog in Gen 7, and so that's why I thought it might be tier 4. Vivillon's actually a pretty decent tier 5 Pokemon. I think it's one of the better tier 5s. It's not good enough for tier 4. I realize that now, but being a Quiver Dance sweeper in tier 5 is really strong. Flyinium Z Viillon is actually a legit set. It gets Hurricane naturally, it gets Bug Buzz, things like that. It's super good mon in terms of that. And I think its 4 times weakness to rocks obviously hinders it, but so does every other bug flying type. I guess you could say it's basically Butterfree, now that I'm thinking
Yeah,
about it.
pretty much.
It's a little bit faster
Um
though. It's base 97 speed, like that's pretty fast.
yeah. So like the reason we're talking about all these moves is because now that these mons are in tier 5, they have a lot more viability to be picked up as tier 5s. So like I mean, I personally would never pick any of these tier 5s if we're being completely honest. But now that they're in tier 5, they have more viability to be picked up in the draft at some point. So
Yeah.
that's why we were talking about it in the first place.
The next one was Trapinch. I actually banned Trapinch because Muddy had it as a low tier trapper because he couldn't afford things like Dugtrio on his stall team. And so I banned it because I'm against the idea of trapping in general. But actually, if we scroll up to the rest of the tier list here, we can see Dugtrio and Gothitelle are both still tier 1, so trapping is allowed. And there was a huge uproar. People are, it's hilarious to look at, but it's not that fun on my end of things. There was a
Yeah.
huge uproar about Trapinch. Half the server was against banning Trapinch, half the server was for banning Trapinch, and so I ended up just adding it back. So just kind of ignore Trapinch.
Yeah, actually, like right before we started recording this video too, he kind of just threw it out there that it would be allowed in tier 5.
Um, we talked about Gligar already.
Yeah.
Laurentius was the next one. I had Laurentius in tier 3, and we moved it down to tier 4. I've seen Laurentius do absolute work, and maybe Austin wants to talk about Laurentius.
God, why? See, like the second that came out of your mouth, that like, oh, I've seen Laurentius do work. Yeah, on me, dude, on me.
Exactly,
But
and on Jed, is the thing. Jed,
really?
yeah, in AABL, I think week 2 or something, Laurentius was just a huge problem for him.
LOL. But I guess I can understand why you put it in tier 3 because I'm like 99% sure it gets defog.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and
the
then it gets
new
contrary too.
yeah, but the new thing it got was superpower with contrary.
Yes. See, like I guess that makes sense in tier 3, but I don't know. I didn't. I say that, but I do think it belongs in tier 4 for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So we talked about Mantines. The next up was Minior.
Meteor,
So Minior was tier 3, which I think is too high. There's
I would
actually
agree.
Minior's standardly in tier 3. In many leagues, Minior is a tier 3 mon, and I sort of just moved it down to tier 4 so that
Yeah,
you
that's
could
kind of
get
weird because like it literally only just shell smashes, right? Like that's all it's good for.
well,
And
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so like, but it's nowhere near as good as like Cloyster that I can think of. That's like the premier shell smasher.
Yeah, Cloyster is probably the premier shell smasher. Minior
But it's like
is
nowhere near as good as Cloyster.
I would say it's the second best after that, though. The thing is that Minior is super fast. Once it's out of shield form and it's into its core form,
Yeah,
it hits
that's another thing that
120.
makes it weird because you have to play around the fact that you have to get it 2 shields down for him in order to it to be
True.
good.
But at the very least, you can't be statused when you're in shield form, so that's really
That's
cool.
true.
And, once you hit 120 base speed, you're outspeeding the majority of the metagame.
Yeah.
So that, I don't know. There was no real reason for moving Minior down. I sort of just wanted to see a little bit more action. Maybe someone will draft Minior this season because it's in tier 4 and they see a little bit more value in it. That's kind of where we're at with that.
Indeed.
Noivern was for some reason tier 3. I
Yeah,
believe it
pretty
gets,
trash.
I think it gets defog now. I don't want to just say that without having anything to back it up, but I know Magic's used Noivern a lot, and so I was tiering
A
things
lot.
a little bit higher to sort of prevent Magic from being able to pick the same stuff all, over and over again. Sorry about that, Magic, but that's kind of one of the reasons. And Noivern,
Can confirm Noivern
it
does get
does.
defogged.
Perfect. There you
Yeah.
go. So that's why. Totally, that's the only reason is that it got defogged, so it was tier 3. It was probably the worst dragon in tier 3 when it was there.
For sure.
And
For
now
sure.
it's probably the best dragon in tier 4. I think the only competition it has is like Druddigon.
Yeah, because Turtonator is tier 5, right?
Yeah, Turtonator. Well, Turtonator's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, so I would probably assume that the only 2 dragons in tier 4 are Jordagon and Noivern.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, yeah. So there you go. That's that's Noivern. We ended up moving Ninetales down from tier 3 to tier 4 because Torkoal is also in tier 4, and Torkoal didn't get moved, I don't think. And I sort of wanted to have the Sunsetters in the same tier.
Yeah, I don't think sun as a weather is very good, like at all. But them being in the same tier definitely makes a lot of sense. It's basically like, do you want the defensive spinner or do you want the offensive setter? And I don't think Ninetales was anywhere near good enough to be in tier 3.
No, I agree. Sharpedo is an interesting one. It's normally tiered in tier 3 just because of, excuse me, being able to get speed boost, just like regular Sharpedo. It's a really good cleaner late game
Hmm.
with speed boost. We moved it down to tier 4 just because I want to see Sharpedo by itself do more. And there's another change with Sharpedo that we'll talk about in a bit, but regular Sharpedo I thought didn't fit tier 3 anymore, and I was kind of trying to change things up a little bit. Another notable mon that I tried to get into tier 4 was Hoopa. It actually got voted down. It got voted against. It was voted to keep Hoopa in tier 3, but I was trying to get Hoopa moved down to tier 4 just because I don't think that Hoopa is a great tier 3 anymore. It's got 2 4 times weaknesses that are extremely crippling to it.
Right. I agree.
Um,
With Sharpedo though, it actually might get drafted because of A-Drive picked it up in what, NPA?
NPA, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great speed boost mon, and we saw, I don't know if anyone's been watching A-Drive's NPA Season 4 videos, he didn't bring Sharpedo the first half of the season, and now he's been consistently bringing Sharpedo as a cleaner, and I think it's been putting in work. He's been bringing like special variants and physical variants, and I think it's a very versatile Pokemon.
Yeah, I would agree. Next is Drampa
No,
in
no, no,
Tier
one above that, one
5.
above that. Okay.
Drampa's pretty bad unless you're running a Trick Room team. I only know that because I played VGC 17, and one of the like earliest teams in VGC 17 was like Oranguru Drampa, and yeah, Drampa's just so slow. It's pretty bad for sure.
It got defog, and that's why it was tier 4.
I'm not
That's the
surprised.
only reason. Talonflame?
You put Emolga in
No,
Tier
Talonflame.
4?
Talonflame.
Oh, I forgot about Talonflame. Okay.
Talonflame is normally tiered as a tier 3. It is not good enough in Gen 7. It's just that's all honestly what it is now is Talonflame is just not good enough. I personally wasn't part of the draft league community in Omega Ruby. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, but
Same.
with the ridiculousness of Gale Wings in that generation, I would imagine Talonflame was at least tier 2 back then. And, now that it's tier 3 in Gen 7, it only gets one hit off with Gale Wings, first of all, and it's still 4 times weak to rocks, so you have to have really good removal for it.
Yeah, I would agree.
It got defog, so I left it in tier 3, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough, and so that's why it's in tier 4 now.
Yeah, 100% agree. And then Emolga got moved to tier 5.
It
I
had
don't know.
defog. That's why
Defog?
it was defogged. That's why it was there.
All right, somebody needs to make a defog meme. Hit me with it.
Oh God, yeah. So that's all kind of the bad Pokemon that got moved around, and sort of our process on that.
Yeah. So again, we only talked about all those mons because of the fact that that because they got moved down, they're in more appropriate tiers, that they're more likely to get picked up by somebody during the draft. But yeah, so you'll notice that if you look at the changes and how we went in order, we actually skipped a few mons, and that's because there were some changes that were a lot bigger than the other ones were. First off, the first of those is, in my opinion, Raikou. Raikou in like every league ever always puts it in tier 1. I do believe that it is more appropriate to be in tier 2, and it actually did get moved to tier 2, and that's very out of the ordinary for draft leagues for the most part. So I think that's going to be a big deal. I think that's going to make Raikou a lot more valuable in the draft. It's like the premier electro type in tier 2. So I thought that was a pretty interesting change that might affect the draft a lot.
Yeah, I think it's interesting now because you had Xurkitree and Rotom Wash in there previously, and both of those didn't really have any competition from an electric. Well, Magnezone as well.
Right, but now you have a speedy electric type in tier 2.
And it's interesting too because you picked Raikou last season. And
I did, in fact, and let's not talk about last season.
But TJ at the same time was trying to do his legendary team, or his base 580 stat team, and because Raikou was tier 1, he couldn't take it. Like, he couldn't fit it on his team because it was a tier 1 and not a tier 2.
Right.
So I think he took Entei instead, which ended up being the kill leader on his team, I think, or at least tied with Regirock, which, again, Regirock being a kill leader on a team, like, hello? It was
that's crazy.
It was in the top 10 in kills. Like, what is that? But he brought a lot of Howl Entei sets. That's besides the point. Raikou, tier 2, I think is, it's cool. We actually voted on Raikou, I think, or I just moved it down. No, I'm pretty sure we voted on Raikou.
Yeah, I think actually all the picks that we're going to touch on individually were all voted on.
Let me just open up the votes real quick to see sort of what they were at. So, Raikou, where were we? Yeah, Reko was 80-20, so there were actually only 10 votes on the changes, and 8 people said Reko should be tier 2, and 2 said it should be tier 1. Still.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Like, Raikou doesn't really do anything special, and because of that, it's not really a tier 1 mon, but I think it's a lot more appropriate in tier 2, for sure. Yep. So next we have Gliscor, which got moved down to tier 2. In my personal opinion, Gliscor should have never been a tier 1 in the first place. Gliscor is just really annoying to deal with. because of like the poison heal ability and the fact that it's so bulky. But again, it's like it wasn't doing anything special enough for it to be deserving of a tier 1 position. So I think it moving to tier 2 definitely makes a lot more sense, and it makes it a lot more viable to be drafted this season.
So again, defog. That was the reason.
XD.
It got Toxic Heal plus defog, and I thought that that was, excuse me, good enough with its overall base stats and just how bulky of a Pokemon it is to leave it in tier 1, but I was wrong with Gligar and Gliscor. Both of them suffer too much from their 4 times ice weakness, especially in draft format when you can
Yeah,
just pop HP ice on whatever, right? Like it's just
exactly.
not that difficult. The votes on Gliscor were actually 80-20 against. It was 8 people for moving it to tier 2 and 2 against.
Raikou.
The Raikou, yeah, the Raikou vote.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just like one of those things where like it seems pretty obvious that it shouldn't be in that tier. But yeah. So next up is Como. This is interesting because like I do think Como is a good dragon type, and it has a really good offensive typing, but it's definitely not a tier 1. It did so like you made these tiers based on the changes in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. So in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, it got Dragon Dance and it got Close Combat, to my knowledge.
Yeah, and
Um,
Stealth Rocks.
and Stealth Rocks. Like all of those were like good changes that definitely made it a lot better, but I don't think it was anywhere good enough to be a tier 1.
To be fair, I also made the tiering before I knew that it got a broken Z move, and so I was expecting it to be able to use its Z move as well. But then we found out the Z move was an Omni Boost, and so we don't allow
Yeah.
Omni Boost in the league. So that was kind of why Como was tier 1.
Yeah, kind of an unfortunate situation for Como Bro, but it's all good.
The votes for it were 70-30, 7 people for moving it and 3 people against moving it.
Interesting that that was the closer of the votes so far.
It is.
But so the next move was Starmie. Starmie is one of those mons where like, yeah, Starmie is good. It's a good spinner. It's a really good offensive mon, giving its dual typing, and because it's like so fast. It also gets analytic, which means it's really hard to switch in on Starmie, basically. But I don't know. Like, I don't feel like it does anything good enough for it to be tier 1. And like, I know you and Jed have both said that like it makes sense for Starmie to be in tier 1, but I think it makes more sense to me for it to be in tier 2.
Yeah, so Starmie gets a ton of different coverage options, and it's a very versatile Pokemon as well as being extremely fast at 115 base speed. And it's a
Yeah.
really good typing. Water Psychic is actually a really good typing. There's very few switch-ins to Water Stab plus Psychic Stab. Um, so that's kind of why it was there. But you're right, it doesn't see a lot of play in Tier 1. And Jed and I had both seen, and Kate actually had seen we've seen Sarmi in tier 2. It might have actually been tier 3 in the DBA, and Jed took it there before he ended up having to leave the league. But I know he liked Starmie when he had it, and so we voted on Starmie, and the votes were 80-20, 8 people for moving it and 2 people against. So
Yeah, I feel like this is also one of those picks that like because Starmie is so regularly put at tier 1 and like nobody ever drafts it because it just doesn't seem like it should be in tier 1. So now that we put it in tier 2, I think it'll see a lot more like contention. It'll be contested
it'll be
more
contested
in
more.
the draft.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So next up we have Kelder. Kelder is like it's a pretty solid mon. It got moved from tier 1 to tier 2, just to clarify. But Kelder is really solid. It's really bulky. I'm pretty sure its base stats are all really high except for its speed. And I mean, it's a pretty good mon. But it's if you're a tier 1 mon, you got to be doing something extremely well. And I don't think Kelder does anything like so well that it deserves to be in tier 1.
So, in my opinion, Conkeldurr is the premier status absorber.
Yeah, I would
It's
agree
a
with that.
fantastic, and the thing is that it gets 3 amazing abilities. You know, it gets Guts, it gets Iron Fist, and it gets Sheer Force.
Sheer force, yeah.
It's disgusting with the coverage options that it gets, and it functions extremely well on a Trick Room team as an amazing physical attacker. We didn't actually vote on this one. I arbitrarily moved it from tier 1 down to tier 2. I thought Conkeldurr just wasn't going to do enough in Tier 1, especially with things up there. Like, we still had the Trappers in Tier 1, and I thought that was sort of
Yeah.
take away. And then we added Zeraora as well, and so I just didn't feel like anyone was going to pick Kelder in Tier 1 either.
Yeah, I would agree. In my opinion, like Starmie and Conkeldurr being moved to tier 2 basically just makes it like because nobody ever picks them if they're in tier 1, so kind of putting them in tier 2 seems more appropriate for them to be drafted at some point.
And at the same time, there's not really many fighting types that you'll ever see in Tier 1 either. So
True.
putting it in Tier 2 where it's maybe got at least a little bit of competition with fighting types, things like Lucario, things like Buzzwole. Um, I think that's actually all that I can name off the top of my head. Oh, Hawlucha as well. Those are all
Yeah.
really good fighting types and they're basically the premier fighting types in the format. And so, leaving it in Tier 2 is also being able to give those fighting types a little bit of competition in Tier 2.
Yeah, I would agree. So then next up, or the last thing that we want to touch on specifically is Honchkrow. Honchkrow was voted on, correct?
Yes, it was.
So Honchkrow moved from tier 3 to tier 4 to my knowledge. Honchkrow really doesn't do anything special. Again, I think its most common set, or to my knowledge, its most common set is like the Super Lux Scope Lens, like Night Slash set, where you get guaranteed crits. But that's kind of like a weird, kind of like a wacky set, and that's like its only viable set. So I don't think it really had any business being in tier 3. I think it's more appropriate in tier 4.
It does. It's actually fairly decent. It's got 125 base attack combined with Brave Birds and stuff, but
Right.
it's a little bit slow. It's got a decent special attack set, so you could run it like a mixed set. The thing that made Honchkrow okay is that it gets Sucker Punch, and it stabs Sucker Punch at that. So it's hitting relatively hard, especially with Super Luck, because then you can get an extra crit Sucker Punch going on, and
Right.
revenge kill something. But Honchkrow's too slow, and so in draft format you see it a lot with the Scarf. I've actually only seen it ever drafted once, and I've been doing draft format for I think 8 months now, and I've seen it drafted one time in like 15 or 16 leagues, and it's not. I don't think it's good enough for tier 3 either, which is sort of why it got moved down to tier 4. It did get the access to defog with its hidden ability. It was already tier 3, but it wasn't good enough for tier 2. That's where we were at. And the vote on Honchkrow was again another 80-20 split with 8
Yeah.
for and 2 against.
Yeah, so now that all of these things have been moved to tier 2, with the exception of Honchkrow being moved to tier 4, I definitely think they're going to shake up the draft a lot, and people are going to be more interested in going for those mons. And those are mons that you're definitely going to have to look out for later in the draft. But yeah, so very few things got moved up a tier in all the season 2 changes. I think we have literally all of the things that got moved up on the list.
Yeah, it's not very many.
Yeah, so the first one is Infernape. I'm kind of iffy about this personally, because it's like, I don't think Infernape is anywhere near as good as stuff like Kieran Black or Landorus Therian, but I can understand why it would be a little bit too strong for tier 2, because it's definitely like one of the premier mons in tier 2 if you put it in tier 2. And I think Cade got some ridiculous team because of the fact that Infernape was tier 2. So I think putting it in tier 1 definitely makes a lot of sense for season 2 of this league.
He did get an absolutely ridiculous team. And the thing is that, it's a 12-man draft as well. So we're all going to get fairly ridiculous teams because
Right.
There's 4 less people. If it was a 16-man draft, there's 4 less people taking stuff away from us. But if it was anyone except for Cade using Infernape, I don't think that it would have moved up. But because his team was so ridiculous, I didn't want that to happen again. And so it moved up to tier 1.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all you can really say about it. Infernape is like Cade's just too good, basically. So then Incineroar got moved up from tier 4 to tier 3, to my knowledge. I believe that's what it was.
Yep.
And that's because the its hidden ability came out like mid-season or just after the season ended or something like that. Intimidating Incineroar is extremely good. I think it has something like a 70% usage rate in VGC right now, which is like insane. It's extremely solid. Like, you can run an AV set and like an AV especially defensive set and still be a physically defensive wall. So I think it being in tier 3 absolutely makes a lot of sense, and it should definitely be there without a doubt.
Yeah, its typing is also really good. The only thing it lacks in is speed, but it's got a lot of good coverage options, and it got some really good move tutors in Ultra Sun Ultra Moon from what I know. I know it got things like Superpower as well, and Knockoff.
Yeah.
It got Knockoff through move tutor as well, I believe. So
Yeah, it's a pretty big one for sure.
yeah,
And then Mega Shark getting moved up to Mega Tier 1 is like, because of the Mega rules that we have in NCL, because you don't have to Mega Evolve on the first turn, Mega Sharpedo was absolutely ridiculous last season, and the fact that it was in Tier 2 was definitely very busted. Again, this kind of goes back to the fact that Cade got an absolutely ridiculous team because a lot of the mons he got were like discounted basically. And so Mega Shark definitely needs to be in Tier 1 because it's very strong in Draft League format, being able to get the speed boost. And now you don't get some insane team at a discount.
yeah, you're not gaining points for taking Mega Shark. I think it's probably going to be a little less value now that it's in Mega Tier 1, although it's probably still the best Mega in terms of not having to Mega Evolve turn 1.
Agreed.
Along with Mega Sableye, I guess, as well, which was drafted by Muddy on his stall team last season. So. And Mega
Shocker
Diancie,
there.
Mega Diancie, which Matt took, and Matt ended up having the best record in the league. So
Yeah.
take that with what you will.
And then Alola Marowak that went from Tier 4 to Tier 3 too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like in my opinion, I'm not really a big fan of Alola Marowak. I used it quite a bit in like early VGC 17, and like I mean it's okay. Getting Lightning Rod is obviously pretty good, but and it does hit like a truck, but it's so slow, it's so easily revenge killed. But I think it being in Tier 4 was definitely pretty low just because of how hard it can hit with Thick Club and stuff like that. So I do think it being in Tier 3 makes a lot more sense, especially given the fact that it has a really good ability in Lightning Rod.
Yeah, so this was the only vote where we offered 3 different tiers for options, and nobody voted for it to move down to Tier 5, but it was an 80-20 split. 8 people voted for it to move up to Tier 3, and 2 people voted for it to stay in Tier 4. I had it in Tier 4 for a reason. I don't think it's good enough for Tier 3. I don't think it's going to be picked in Tier 3.
I completely
And
agree.
I think the only reason that people voted for it to move up potentially is because Magic brought a Flame Charge set 1 week, and it actually had the speed to outspeed things with enough Flame Charge boosts.
Yeah, didn't it get like 3 or 4 or something?
I think it was against Jed, actually, and Jed unfortunately got manhandled by a Alola
Yeah.
Marowak.
So yeah, those things moving up now, that means this stuff can potentially go a lot earlier than they normally would. Just because they simply moved up. So like them being in a higher tier means that they are considered better mons, so they might be picked earlier. Or they could also be picked later because now that they're in a higher tier, they could fall through the cracks of people picking them from those tiers or people picking from those tiers. So now they might slip through the cracks and be picked up later in the draft.
Yeah,
So
I personally think that they're all going to go later than they would because they don't have as much value as they did before.
yeah, I would agree. So yeah, that covers all the tier changes and how we think they're going to like change the draft around and like how they're going to change people's minds about how they draft and what they draft in the draft. So yeah. So now we have like a few speculations about what we think coaches are going to do with their drafts. I only know like a few people in this league, so Ian will be able to talk a lot better about some of the coaches that he knows. But yeah, so the first question is, what is Jay going to pick in his base 100 and below team?
Yeah, so that's really interesting that Jay's putting this on himself. I know he gets bored of playing standard all the time. He was bugging me about making this a tier 3 and below season, and I was like, well, you know, the P4G is already doing that. I don't really want to copy the P4G necessarily, but we sort of had some ideas. So I know you had mentioned Kyurem Black and Landorus Therian both being under base 100.
I would say if he doesn't want to draft the other thing that you're about to talk about, then his top 2 picks are definitely going to be Landorus Therian and Kyurem Black. Landorus Therian being at base 97 speed and Kyurem Black being at base 91?
Yep.
Okay, well, Leonard Stanley being at base 91 speed and Kieran Black being at base 95 speed. I got that one right.
Yeah. So the other option that we had just discussed between each other is Sand, and we think that it's very viable for Jay to actually draft Sand. There's a few things on the table. Excadrill's base 88. Both of the premier Sand setters in Hippowdon and Tyranitar are both under. I think Hippowdon's like, oh god, I can't remember.
Something super slow, and then Tyranitar
47
is
or something.
like
Tyranitar's
70.
61. And then we also had talked about Mega Garchomp being a really good Sand Sweeper. It's
Yes,
a really good Sand Sweeper, and it's base 92 speed because it gets the speed decrease when it Mega Evolves. Um,
indeed.
One thing that I had mentioned when we were just talking about it that I just realized now is Landorus Incarnate. Now, Landorus Incarnate's a tier 2. Unfortunately, Landorus Incarnate hits base 101 speed, so if he were to draft Sand, he'd be,
Ouch.
going a little bit awry from his self-made criteria. But then there's also
Yeah.
something like Stoutland, which is base 80 speed, I think, here in tier
Yeah.
4.
And then he doesn't even have to grab a tier 1 Sandsetter. He can just grab Gigalith, which is also very much below base 100 speed.
Yeah, so we think that that's, kind of an option there for Jay.
And then is this league where Magic brings back the first pick Meloetta, dude? Is this where he does it?
So it's interesting because Magic was actually getting coached by Jay last season. Jay helped him with his
Yes, I
draft, and
saw that.
I think that's why. Now, not to take anything away from Magic, he played extremely well last season, and I actually think didn't he win Coach of the or Most Improved Coach?
Yes, he did. I'm like 99% sure he won most improved coach.
Yeah, he did. He won Most Improved Coach. So shoutouts to Magic for winning Most Improved Coach. Um, he had a fantastic team. Mega Gardevoir was also the offensive MVP. And I'll let you sort of touch on him a sec because someone rang my doorbell. So I'll be right back.
All right. So yeah, Magic. I've known Magic for quite some time now. I met him in UPBA season 1, 2. What league did I join? I think it was UPBA season 1. And I saw him first pick Meloetta for like 3 or 4 drafts in a row or something like that. And I believe the league where he stopped doing that was this league, NCL season 1. He really likes Meloetta for some reason. Like, I mean, Meloetta's a good mon, but I don't think it's round 1 first pick worthy. But yeah, I think he played amazing last season. And if I had to guess, Magic is not going to pick Meloetta first round. I mean, if he wants to bring it back, then I'm sure he can. Like, there's nothing stopping him, obviously. But if I had to guess, Jay is not going to let him pick the Meloetta first round because, like Ian said, Jay obviously helped Magic a lot last season, helping him to become a better player and a better coach.
So
So
it's interesting now because Jay's actually coaching as well. So I'm not sure if they'll sort of be working together this season or not.
yeah, I'm really glad you came back. I was running out of ideas. But
Yeah, it's worthy
yeah,
to note actually, now that we're talking about Meloetta and Magic had Meloetta on his team last season, there was no franchising allowed, so everything is back on the board just like it was last season.
right, yeah. So the next question is: does Jed troll? Does he give this the EPTL treatment where he first picks Saucebuck? That
Now,
was funny.
I don't think he's going to. I think Jed's out for blood. Unfortunately, due to the randomizer not being that kind, Jed didn't make playoffs despite him having a better record than all of the other conference.
Feels bad.
So I don't think that he's going to pull an EPTL and sort of draft his tier 5s early. Now, granted, his team in EPTL is actually like really disgusting.
Yeah, fun fact: he actually trolled the draft, and then was later after he finished the team, he was like, you know what, I actually like this team, and trades to get rid of his garbage tier 5s and
Yeah.
made it a good.
It's a really good team. So I know Jed had thrown a few ideas out to us of what sort of monotype teams he might want to draft or sort of
Yeah,
single
like
team
poison or
teams.
steel,
Yeah,
and then he was thinking about a forest theme. I think is what you said.
we'll see. We'll see if he actually ends up going with those. His draft last season was really good, except for Excadrill, which I had a big problem with. And luckily, he dropped Excadrill after it did absolutely nothing for him. But Excadrill can't function on a sand team, and he learned that throughout the season. And he ended up picking up Scizor, I think, for Excadrill, which was just so much better on his team.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, does Corona draft yet another monotype? What do you think?
Well, last season he drafted the Mono Dragon team, and despite his record last season, he ended up making playoffs. Um, he almost beat me in the first round of playoffs too, with the Mono Dragon team. So I'm not sure. I know he sort of holds himself to his own rule where he tends not to draft things that he's ever used either laddering or in draft league before. So we'll sort of see if he's going to draft a bunch of new stuff or if he sticks to his guns and drafts some old stuff that he's maybe a little bit more comfortable with.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I don't really know anything about Corona, so this is like a totally "what do you think"
Oh, there you
question.
go. Well, yeah. I know a lot about Daniel, and he's got a few things up his sleeve.
All
Sure.
right. Next is does K try to recreate his championship team? Now, to my knowledge, this is physically impossible because of the way the tiering's changed. With Infernape going up to tier 1 and Mega Shark going up to Mega tier 1, it's like genuinely impossible for him to get the same championship team just because of the distribution of points.
Yep.
But do you think he drafts some of the same stuff in order to try and replicate his Season 1 success?
So I do. I know he was talking to me about a specific pick, and he was asking me about franchising for a specific pick that he had from his team from last season. So we'll see if he ends up getting that. He does have a relatively high draft spot, and I actually traded my draft spot away, so I know that he might be relatively safe in taking something safe again from his championship squad last season.
Right.
There's a few things that stand out to me that he might want to bring back as well. Something like Scolipede was, reasonably good for him at the end of the season when he picked it up at the end. Avalugg,
The table,
Avalugg
dude.
won defensive MVP. I think he might try and get Avalugg back.
Dude, I didn't even know like Avlog existed in Draft League until I saw like one of his first battles in NCL where it was like hard walling somebody's entire team, and I was like, dude, this thing is crazy.
Yeah, so Avalug's really weak on the special side, but it's a fantastic physical wall. And
It's like base 180 something defense. It's crazy.
the problem is that it's a pure ice type, and ice is not a very good defensive typing. But
Yeah,
he managed to make it work on the team, and all the power to him, right?
yeah, for sure. I know he was talking about picking up Mega Glalie too in the chat. Whether he does that or not will be seen later. But I think it would be cool if he picked up Mega Glalie, to be honest. I've never seen Mega Glalie used, but from what I understand, it's basically just Mega Salamence, but Ice type.
Yeah, so I saw it used in PCL Season 1. Mortal actually drafted it in the first season of PCL, and I think he actually brought it against me, so, there's that video if anyone wants to go watch that. Just plug myself real quick, but
Yeah,
yeah, it gets, like things like Refrigerate Explosion, so it's not walled by any ghost types anymore with Explosion, and that is a hard-hitting move. Ice is the premier offensive type in the game, in my opinion. And, refrigerate boosted, so it's already 1.3 times or 1.2 times in Gen 7, sorry. And, it's an explosion, so it's a base 250 power move plus
right.
stab. So, it's getting a little bit ridiculous on the power. It's a good spike setter as well. It gets Ice Shard. Frustration is generally what you see ran on it, like Frustration, Earthquake, Ice Shard, and like spikes or something. Or
Yeah.
Explosion, I guess, as well.
So whether or not K replaces his Mega Shark from last season with Mega Glalie, we'll have to see in the draft. But yeah, so what OP Mon do you think Matt gets next season?
Man, Matt snuck by, man. He snuck by hard last season. I think
He
everyone
like
sort
barely
of...
spoke to anyone, and then he just showed up like, "Hey, dude, I'm actually super good at this game." And I
Yeah,
was like,
Matt finished first in the regular season with a disgusting team. I think it helped a little bit that TJ and Corona weren't necessarily taking the draft that seriously, and they were drafting, Mono Dragon and Mono base 580 stats. So
right,
he managed to get away with things like Mega Diancie, Landorus, Therian, Jirachi, and Volcarona all on the same team.
insane.
And Rotom Wash, actually. I totally forgot about that. He
Yeah, and Rotom lost.
and Lanoon, and Lanoon as well, which was a
Crazy
huge threat
team.
too. So his team was absolutely insane. I'm not sure if he would want to go for Landorus again. Landorus didn't perform that well for him. He used it pretty well, but it ended up not being the premier threat on his team. I think Jirachi and Volcarona were the biggest threats on his team.
Yes, I would agree. Jirachi hardwalled my entire team in 2 games. So I would agree that Jirachi was definitely something that served his team a lot better.
Yeah, so we'll see. Maybe Matt wants to pick up some stuff from the previous season. Maybe he wants to grab something else that's maybe a little bit broken that he sees going on there. Maybe he is the one to grab a Tapu or a Tornadus or a Victini or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so the final question, the question of
Actually,
all
let's
questions.
sort of touch on. I'll just sort of give my individual thoughts on each coach and what I think they may draft before we
Oh,
ask
okay,
them.
okay.
Yeah.
That's all good.
So Jed, we talked about there. I think you have a few things on your mind. I think you're sort of going to go a route where you just kind of pull what I did last season and draft a bunch of stuff that you've never used before.
Yes, and it's also a core that I'm kind of grabbing from somebody else that drafted some other things in another league, and I thought there was a really good defensive combination of mons, and I'm going to try and translate his success to my success.
Dom, I think Dom's going to pick up some stuff that we've never seen him use before. He does like to stick to a few things that he's used in the past. He's a big fan of Alolan Persian, I know.
Right,
He's a big Weavile fan, I think. He talked about drafting something from his UPBA Season 1 team. I'm not necessarily going to give that away in case people sort of go after maybe the pick that he's going to grab. I know
right.
he's taken Delmise a few times now as well. Nacho, I know what his first pick is going to be. I'm not going to disclose that. I think you know what it's going to be as well. I believe he approached you about if you were going to take it.
Yes, I actually completely forgot about that entire DM conversation until
Yeah.
you said something.
So I ended up trading my draft spot with Nacho, so he is the third overall pick, and I know what he's going to go for. I know he's used it one time in the past. Nacho's a very experienced draft league player, and I think he's going to go for a few things that sort of fit his playstyle really well. He's good at identifying what fits his playstyle.
Yeah.
We talked about Matt. We talked about Cade. Me, I don't know what I want. I have a few things on my mind. I'm not necessarily sure how I'm going to build a team around them, but I have a long list of things that I've never used before, and so we'll go with that. Um, we talked about Daniel. We talked about Magic and his Meloetta and maybe what he'll pick. Magic likes to stick to the same stuff quite often. He doesn't necessarily stray away from a lot of things. You'll
AKA
notice,
Meloetta.
yeah, you'll notice his logo is or his team is Glaceon.
Glaceon. Yeah.
He likes to draft Glaceon a lot. A lot of the evolutions he's a big fan of. Um, Ben? Ben or Fizzle?
Oh yeah, Fizzle the
Ben's
Hizzle.
Ben's a hard one to read. I'm not sure what Ben's gonna take. He kind of wrecked me in
He
our
strikes
WPL
me.
match.
Yeah, he strikes me as the kind of person who I mean, I've literally never battled him because you guys are in the red league and I'm in the leagues, and I don't even think I watched your guys' match to be completely honest.
Oh,
But
cuts deep.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But he strikes me as the kind of person who like, and he'll just troll and get random stuff, but he'll come into other drafts and get stuff that's actually really good and play really well.
I think he's a fan of balance is kind of what I've seen from his playstyle,
Yeah.
so we'll sort of see that coming out of him. Jay we discussed, especially with his stuff, and then Phil or Pip and is the last coach.
Phil's crazy. Phil's so good at this game.
Phil finds value in places where you wouldn't expect it, and I think that's
Yes.
sort of where he's gonna go with the draft. All
Yeah,
right,
be looking out for Phil's tier 3 and tier 4s.
so there you go. Last question.
Yeah, last question. The question of all questions, dude. How good is Wailord, and who will draft it?
Wailord is absolutely amazing.
Praise be unto our Lord and Savior Wailord.
Anyone who watched the brief UPBA Season 2 knows that Wailord is the Lord. And if you've been part of the NCL server before, especially around April Fool's Day, you'll know that Wailord is the savior of our planet and is the mascot of potentially something coming up. I don't necessarily know if I want to touch on it too much in detail, but Jed has something in the works. So yeah, that's
Do I know about this?
Yeah, I think
I feel like I do, but I haven't thought about it in forever.
Yeah, you do for sure.
All right, so I think that's all we have. I feel like we've been recording for like 30 minutes.
It's been almost an hour actually, 59 minutes.
Ouch, that's a really long video. I'm glad you're uploading this and not me. If I video, I'd be here all night.
Oh, it'll go up really quickly. Yeah.
I hate you so much. You know that? You know what my upload speed is, dude? Guess.
I don't know.
1.
Oof. Yeah, there you go. All right.
But yeah, that's the NCL season 2 draft speculation video, right, my dude?
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you for some more
Oh
content.
wait, before we go,
Go ahead.
check out Ian's channel, which will be in the description, and then or wait, this is
Yep.
yeah, check out Ian's channel in the description, and then check out my
And
channel in
yours,
the
which will also be in the description.
yes. Don't forget to do that. We make our own videos.
Oh, and
But
also, while I'm at it, all of the coaches who upload YouTube content are part of the featured channels on the NCL YouTube, so go and check them out as well.
yes, do that please.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you later.